Welcome to DIY Aquascapes. Today we're doing a brief breakdown of my 300-gallon Paludarium. I call it the Behemoth. What started as a simple birthday gift, an aquarium and a stand, has evolved into this massive enclosure you see here. Standard aquariums are great, but they have one massive design flaw: front to back depth. If you've ever tried to aquascape a standard 55-gallon tank, you know exactly what I mean. It's famously narrow, only about 12 inches deep. It can feel like trying to paint a masterpiece on a cocktail napkin. You run out of hardscape room almost instantly, and building a true multi-dimensional ecosystem feels next to impossible. Follow along as I show you how I went from this to this. After building a sturdy stand, I realized I had 2 full sheets of plywood left over, and a stand that measured exactly 4 feet wide. I stood a full sheet of plywood right up behind the stand, looked at it, and said, I guess we're doing this. What I ended up with is a 300-gallon dual-zone Paludarium I call the Behemoth. Up top, a deep, cavernous jungle landmass that extends 12 inches past the aquarium. Down below, a flooded forest floor. The entire foundation of this project comes down to structural engineering. I wanted the peace of mind of a commercially manufactured watertight glass bottom, but I needed the creative freedom of a footprint twice that size up. To achieve this, I designed and built a heavy wooden enclosure that completely wraps around the 55-gallon tank. The most nerve-wracking part of the entire build was the fit had to be absolutely flush, and standard aquariums are anything but. I had to precision notch a rail out of the side wall so the lip of the aquarium's plastic frame would slide right in. There was zero room for error. A fraction of an inch off, and the wood could have unevenly stressed the glass under the weight of 55 gallons of water. It required a massive amount of patience, a little bit of nerve, and a steady, continuous force to slide the glass tank into place. It locked in like a glove, completely flush, and hasn't budged a millimeter in 4 years. I sealed the seam with some aquarium-safe silicone, and the top inside face of the plywood with 4 coats of animal-safe epoxy. Enclosure expands an extra 12 inches past the back of the aquarium. It gave the terrestrial plants a massive landmass to root to, but more importantly, it allowed me to create a hidden utility corridor right behind the scenery. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of footage of the earlier tank. 4 years of uninterrupted growth, though, has completely transformed the landscape. What started as a few terrestrial trimmings has evolved into a massive self-sustaining canopy. The root systems have aggressively hunted down the waterline, bridging the gap between the land and the water, exactly like a natural riverbank. When you build a system this large and complex, time is your ultimate co-designer. The wood ages, moss fills the crevices, and the ecosystem takes over. But a system can only age this beautifully if the mechanics behind it are built to last. Let's head behind the tank into the utility corridor. The biggest mistake people make when building custom paludariums or large-scale aquascapes is burying their equipment. If a pump fails, a heater goes bad, or a line clogs 6 months down the road, you have to rip apart your hardscape to fix it. The design has failed. Because the top land zone sits a foot further back than the aquarium, I use that asymmetrical space to create a dedicated plumbing chase. The filtration loops seamlessly out of the upper landmass, runs cleanly down the side panel, and feeds an external canister filter tucked away in the bottom cabinet. It keeps the display completely clean while giving me the instant access to the filter. This is also where I installed my false bottom drain, hooked up to this ball valve. Just turn the valve and the false bottom drains right into the bucket. Or folder skin. Next to this is my misting system reservoir, and behind the enclosure is the pump. The pump feeds up the back of the enclosure and into the top lighting chamber, where it's dispersed through 4 nozzles. With the engineering and plumbing locked down, the final challenge was the aquascape itself, making 2 completely separate zones look like one continuous environment. On the left side, I focused heavily on vertical integration. The Monstera and Pothos vines up top drop their root system straight past the wooden frame and into the water, weaving around this massive, sweeping, dark driftwood. It creates a stunning canopy effect, casting natural dappled shadows that mimic a flooded jungle floor. On the right side, I had to figure out how to hide the internal filter intake and heater without ruining the view. My solution? Build a vertical rock waterfall. Unfortunately, the waterfall developed a leak because I used a contractor bag as a pond liner. The pothos eventually broke through the bag liner, and the waterfall started leaking into the false bottom. The stone texture from the terrestrial jungle continues seamlessly underneath the water's surface, completely masking the gear. It terminates in this awesome flat stone shelf right at the waterline, creating the perfect natural ledge to balance out the heavy hardscape. The lower aquarium utilizes finer plant textures like Java ferns and Amazon swords, leaving an open path in the substrate to give the fish a clear swimming lane against the dense backdrop. By thinking outside the box and building a custom enclosure around a standard, affordable tank size, you can completely bypass the limitations of a narrow footprint and create an ecosystem with massive, jaw-dropping scale. 4 years in, and the Behemoth is still thriving, growing, and changing every single day. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this hybrid design. How would you utilize an extra foot of hidden depth behind your tank? Drop a comment down below, hit that like and subscribe button if you want to see the next phase of this ecosystem's journey.